Oh, people are here. Okay. Hello, people. Hi. Can you all hear me? Can you all hear me? You can hear me? Okay, I can't hear you. Let me see 1 second. Okay, well, I'm just going to talk then. So while we're all getting settled here, you can all just introduce yourselves in the chat like you already are. And so nice to meet you all. Okay, we have, oh, wait, they can't hear you. They can't hear Romina. Romina, can you check your audio? Odd. Okay. Hi, everyone. Okay. Sorry about this, guys. But welcome. It's nice to have you all here. We got Puerto Rico, we got Charlotte, we have Guadalajara, we have, oh, yay, Andorra. Oh, I can see you now and hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I reloaded the page. I just think as
Awesome.
people started logging on, it started to slow down the...
Okay. Well, now that gave us time to make sure everyone got here, so I think that's fine. And just to get started, throughout the chat, just any questions that you have, feel free to just put them there and we'll answer them as we go. But if we don't have time to, we have a 10 to 15 minute section at the end of the chat to answer all questions. And after that, if we don't get to everything, then feel free to contact us on social media as well.
Yes. Let's give it maybe a couple more minutes, maybe until like 5 after, and then we start. That sounds
well, isn't
good.
Romina looking fabulous with her hair and makeup today?
I mean, do go on. You know, I was kind of bummed. I was bummed I wouldn't have a chance to wear this new lipstick, and I'm like, you know, why let this stop you?
You know, I have a problem with my lipstick. Well, my favorite one, it's like the cap is broken or whatever. So yeah, we'll see if I get desperate enough to order from Sephora.
I know. I know. I'm not going to lie. Until today, I hadn't bathed in, I want to say 5 days. I mean, you know, because I want to say 5 days, and that's generous. So, you know, this is like, my mom saw me and was like, whoa.
Who are you? Oh, I'm so happy to see some California people in the replies. I've lived in San Francisco for 10 years. Yeah, love it.
I love Cali too. I actually was living in Los Angeles for a while, and now I'm in Miami. Nice. So I'm coming to all of you from 90-degree weather right now.
Oh, that sounds beautiful, honestly.
I'm not a summer person.
I am. I'll take it from you.
Where are you guys coming from? Oh, let's see more.
We got people from all over.
I saw Puerto Rico.
Yes. I
love Puerto Rico.
Okay. think we should give it about another minute.
Sure.
Sure.
So I don't know about you, but I have been working on the sequel to Lobizona all day.
Nice. How's that
And,
going?
well, it's great, but you know that it's like a very unique experience writing series, because in the sense of like nearly always you're well into the sequel before the first book even comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so jarring a little bit, you know, because I'm like trying to get ready to promote Lobizona and I keep thinking of stuff I want to say or do, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
they don't know yet, you know?
Yeah.
Doesn't it feel like you're keeping the secret almost? Or
It does, yeah. And there's just like little things, like you're seeing how people are reacting to the first book and you're like, maybe I should change what's happening in the second book. But I haven't really changed it, but you know, the thoughts come.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we've already done a 4-book series. So.
Well, yes. With ZODIAC, it was especially hard because, especially being my first one, like I felt, and this is your debut, so like I felt more susceptible to that, like where I was like, oh my God, if a Goodreads reviewer thought this, like, do I really need to think about this before I get to the third book? And but then I found like I kind of, once I moved past it, I enjoyed the process more because it felt like getting back to before all of this. When it was just for me, you know.
Which is the hardest part in the second book.
Yes. Yeah. The second book is a hard one.
Yeah.
It's like that middle is a little hard.
Yeah, it is. All right.
Are you working on any projects similar to ZODIAC? Well, I am working on Lobizona. And it's similar in the sense of like that it's fantasy. But we'll get into this a little bit. When you sign a contract for a series, when are you to start? The question is, when you sign a contract for a series, when are you expected to start writing book 2?
Yeah, it can vary. I'd say by the time the book comes out, by the time the first book comes out, you're deep into edits for book 2. But as far as like starting it, that will depend, because if you're good at drafting one project and editing another at the same time, or if personally you have to wait until you finish editing to move on to drafting something else, that will change it too. But the actual date where you have to turn things in, that varies for everyone.
It absolutely does vary for everyone.
Yeah.
Well,
looks
Melanie,
like...
hi. I'm glad you're enjoying Lobizona.
It's so good. All right, we have a good amount of people here.
Yeah, should we?
So I think.
So why don't we get started, and whoever else comes on. Thank you for coming, everyone. Yes. I'm Romina.
I'm Francesca.
And we want to first start off by thanking Las Musas for, in addition to being such an amazing organization, allowing us to have this platform to amplify our voices and have our characters be heard and seen. And we do want to take a quick moment and you know, we'll show you some of those other seminars later, but for right now, we just want to tell you that there are more amazing webinars, lasmusasbooks.com, if you want to check those out. And it's especially fun right now when we're all trapped at home and we have some company.
Yes.
So I guess now that we're all acquainted on a first name and city basis, almost, Francesca and I are gonna tell you a little bit about us and our books. Do you want to start?
Sure, yes. So I will simultaneously answer a question that just popped up in the chat. This is my debut, so it's my first book, Diamond City, and it came out in January. It's about a young assassin in an industrializing city. She messes up on a job, and then while she's trying to fix her mistake, aka kill the person that she was sent to kill, she uncovers a conspiracy, and yeah, that's the book. And so to start off, I'm just going to read a short snippet. It's from the prologue, so just like first page. So, do you want to know the secret to survival? Ina's eyes snapped up from the sticky wooden table and widened at the man who sat across from her. The bar's dim light glinted off his smile. Fast-playing flutes, rowdy drunks, and dancers stomping their feet across the floor nearly drowned out his next words. You count and you look, he whispered. You count everything and you look at everyone. Are you paying attention, street child? Her frown deepened. Every underage person in this bar was a street child, but she still disliked being called one. It marked her as dirty, poor, without a future. She was dirty and poor, but the idea of a future hadn't faded from her mind yet. A high collar framed the man's pale face as he took her in. Perhaps he was going to offer her a job. Something about him smelled rich, maybe the scent of cologne. He was probably one of the industrialists made wealthy by steam and steel. 36 people were in this bar when you entered, making you the 37th. He leaned closer, his gaze fixing on her as adamantly as a noose around the neck. The door opened once inward and twice outward because the wind pushed your hair around your cheeks the first time, but not the next two. She blew a strand of wet hair out of her eyes and tried not to shiver, but she was soaked from getting pushed into the Minos River by some boys who dropped her. She wanted warm clothes and a bed to sleep on. She didn't want to play this man's game. Crossing her arms, she turned away to ignore him, but he continued speaking. That means there should be 36 people in this room, but did you count? There are 35. Where's the missing link? He barely paused for a breath. You don't know. He's planting a bomb in the rafters. Don't look up. You've only got 20 seconds. I have a job you might be good at. If you come work with me, everyone here will die, but we'll survive. If you don't, you'll die without ever knowing what you could become. Do you want your life to end at 12 years, Zaina Solis?
Awesome. How good is that? So I was actually, side note, telling Francesca that I got so into it. I was supposed to be working on the book and I just could not stop reading.
Thank you.
So I'm Romina. My book is Lobizona. And it's about a girl named Manu who basically is an undocumented immigrant living in Miami and hiding with her mom. And when she basically thinks she's in hiding because she's undocumented and also because she has strange otherworldly eyes. And then when there's an ICE raid and her mom is taken, she's left alone and with nowhere to turn. And so she starts looking into who her father was and all the clues they left behind. And it leads her to discover that she's not exactly human, and that maybe it's not just her residency that's illegal, but her entire existence. All right, so I'm going to read a quick excerpt in here. Did I do this already? Let me just, I don't know if okay. Technically adapt. Okay. The voices sound like they're coming from up ahead, so I tread through the trees as quietly as I can, picking my way through the raised roots and bristly branches. When at last I glimpse shadows on the dirt path, I slow down. It seems brighter where these people are, like the area is being illuminated by something. Looking up, I see golden stars winking through the treetops, and I'm so distracted by their light that I don't immediately realize I've reached the edge of the woods. I look down just in time to see the mangroves fall away, revealing a clearing filled with shooting stars. No, not stars, insects. They look like dancing bubbles of light. Their frenzied flying draws golden designs in the black air, uncloaking the landscape ahead. I must have left reality and stepped into a dream. The world beyond looks like an ancient city that got swallowed up by this swamp. Giant stone structures rise from the soil, as deeply rooted to the land as the foliage ensnaring them, making it impossible to know where nature ends and man begins. I stick to the tree line as the group of teens I overheard disappears around the corner of a building with the largest tree I've ever seen growing inside. Its giant branches burst through the sky-high roof, reaching into the stars. Across the way sits a smaller, off-white palace with a crumbling corner that leaves its top story partially exposed. A swarm of green vines reaches inside, twining through the place like an invading army. Farther down, I glimpse a mansion half buried in a mound of dirt, with flowers of every color growing along its walls. The way these structures seem as married to the marsh as the timeless trees makes me think of the citadel from my Lunaritis dreams. There's an ancient world buried deep within the Everglades. How is this possible? Where am I?
It's so good.
Did I just stop?
Guys, Lobizona is so good. You got to read it when it comes out. It's really good. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So just to really kick off the chat portion of this, I'm going to send out a question to you all. And the question is, what do you struggle with most in world building? There are a few options: the history of the world, the magic systems, the geography and culture, and the description. And I'm just gonna wait a bit for you all to get your answers in there. But for me, yes, I see the first answer is magic systems. That's the same for me. They're so like finicky and you have to like think of every possible, yeah, magic systems are hard. What about you, Romina?
That's really funny because that's the total anti-Virgo answer. Like, as a Virgo, I'm like, ooh, system, like organizing, control, control, control. I think I actually struggle with geography, as evidenced by the fact that I get lost going anywhere. I've like no spatial sense in my brain. And so I worry, like with Zodiac, you know, I was designing a universe with 34 inhabited planets, and I'm pretty sure each planet is the size of a small town, you know, because like in my brain.
See, and I love directions, like, or not love, I don't know if you can love directions, but I like,
okay,
I love getting lost in a new place, but I can always like figure my way out. I don't know,
anxiety.
Getting lost is half the fun.
You said that and my hands got kind of like the word lost, like.
Well, I see, yeah, some people also had geography like yours. Yeah, we got a lot of varied answers there. Just gonna end this, but that's yeah.
Pretty
it's
much,
a good,
you're right.
Yeah. It's good start the conversation and talking about own voices and world building, I think, because using your own experience can help a lot with those things, like the setup of your world, what it's like, what the cultures are like in your world. So I'm just gonna talk a little bit about how I incorporated my own experience into my book, Diamond City. So first of all, the whole cast is made up of children of immigrants or immigrants themselves, which is really important to me as the child of an immigrant. And growing up, and even now, all of my like friend groups and the closest people to me, we all have really diverse backgrounds and usually are from immigrant families. And so it was really important and natural for me to include that. And I think it kind of goes well with the city itself, which is industrializing. It's sort of late 1800s US technology and like development level. So there are a lot of people coming in from different places and changing the way this whole country works. And so, yeah, so that was important for me to include. And it's also somewhat based on where I grew up. So I spent my whole adult life in San Francisco, but I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Pittsburgh has a long history of like steel work, and it was really involved in the industrialization of the US. And so this whole like gritty industrial feel of the city cuisine in my book, it's a lot of it is based on Pittsburgh. And there's even rivers that almost surround the city in Pittsburgh. And the city in the book is on a little island surrounded by rivers. So that's one little thing. I also wanted to include a lot of sort of history in subtle ways. So I like knowing a lot about the history of US intervention in Colombia and other Latin American countries, and long history of wars and conflicts in our countries. And so I wanted to include a little bit of that in my book. It's a bit subtle and it's a bit of a mix of different things, but yeah, I tried my best to include it. Yeah, and
I like that. I like that, and I think that really comes across. You know, it felt it, even though your book is clearly like fantastical, like it's still like I feel like I know these places too. You know, and that's part of what is so special about Own Voices and world building. You know, because ultimately, and we were talking about this the other day, like. The idea of own voices is so inclusive because the universal is in the personal, you know? And so the idea of these like very personal descriptions and settings and stories to us will resonate because of how real that seed is. And that's really what own voices is. It's being authentic to the experience. And so, you know, for me with Lobizona, I think the important thing was talking about being an immigrant. It was about the otherness. I immigrated to this country when I was 5. You know, most of my anxiety stemmed from language issues of transitioning from Spanish to English. So I just think I really latched on to language as this thing, you know, the most fascinating sort of presence in my existence. So I really wanted to talk about how that feels to not really have a home, to sort of come from two worlds but belong to neither. And the Septima species, which is like the fantasy species of my book, they're sort of an immigrant species because their power hails from Lunaris, which is this like moonlit realm that they access at the full moon. but they are in these mortal human bodies. And so in this way, they really don't have a true home. And I think that's something that a lot of us can relate to, and more, you know? So yeah, so I do think that there's something about combing like our own world and our experiences and our identities, like for creating this, that builds not just a fantasy world, but a fantasy world with resonance, which is really ultimately what you want.
Yeah, sure. I think you absolutely nailed that, especially the whole not feeling like you really belong anywhere. Like I felt that connection in your book. And it's like you said, it's a fantasy world, but you can see a lot of your own life experiences, even if you're not an immigrant, or you can connect to it somehow. And that's what's I think really important to get in fantasy world building.
Agreed.
Yes. So I think
you want to do another poll?
Let me see. Yes, I was seeing if there's any questions that we've answered. Yes. Let's start with how
do you
magic.
build your world? You build them before? Oh, yeah. Process. You know what? We're going to try to get into process in a minute. Right?
We will. Yes.
Yeah.
In a bit. Yes. Yes. And I think more about what people are saying is difficult for them. I think we're going to get into that. So I'm just going to send one more poll. And that's sort of what we're just talking about the messages. Let's see. What is this? Oh.
Yeah, actually, because it's so funny. World building, I mean, look, you could build any kind of world and you can use any kind of approach, but ultimately, you know, so much of it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, you know, what the goal is in the story, what the messaging is, whatever that is. And so, you know, there's a lot of ways to answer the question of how to build worlds, but a good way is this poll asking like, what do you want to hone in on? Like, what is the most important thing?
Yes. So we have a few options there. One is level of spectacle. So that would be like, how much magic is in this world? Is that what's really important to you? Diversity of characters, the complexity of systems, that can be magic, politics, any of that, or relevance of messaging, which is sort of what we just talked about. It's fun seeing the poll go up and down.
It's funny how level of spectacle is.
Yeah.
Relevance
and that's interesting. Like in people who like fantasy, if level of spectacle is sort of the least important thing among us, that's really interesting, I think.
I do too, actually.
Yeah.
It's funny because I'm kind of torn between complexity and messaging. That's usually where I'm at.
Yeah, complexity, it is fun to build that. For me, I like the relevance of messaging, and not just political messaging or talking about current events, but also just trying to include ways that can that your readers can relate to on like a deep personal level, no matter what it is, even if it's just a character's experience, or even if the character's flaws, maybe readers can relate to having some of the same flaws in their own life. And yeah, I just like to include that in my book in whatever way. Yes.
So, I mean, we can probably get into a little bit about how we apply real world into fantasy and kind of then go more into specific on process.
Yeah. So for me, I really wanted to include sort of what Romina was just talking about feeling like you don't really belong anywhere. And so I really wanted to place importance on my cast of diaspora characters and how they're all sort of navigating this world that wasn't necessarily made with them in mind. And that was important to me, as well as the characters who are all like, pretty young. It's a YA book. And I wanted to highlight how youth in general are sort of left with the problems from their parents and grandparents' world. And they have to decide if they want to change it or not. And if they do want to change it, how they're going to go about doing that, navigating in this world and fighting the things that stand against you. And so in the main group of friends, there's 4 of them, and they all come from slightly different backgrounds. And so they each have a different perspective. And yeah, I wanted to include that because I think when you show, I think something that fantasy does really well is that it takes these problems that are maybe real world problems, or maybe they're just internal problems that you like, emotional experiences that you have. And you show readers how it affects your character, and it puts the reader in their shoes. And I think fantasy can create empathy in that way. in a way that's a
Absolutely.
little bit more difficult or not as, I don't know. I love fantasy. I'm going to say fantasy does it best.
I agree. Yeah, there's such a universal aspect to it, you know, and I think it is really hard to separate like the fantasy stuff from like the real world relevance. Lobizona in particular, you know, part of the whole application of real world into it, it kind of comes on multiple levels. On the one hand, I got the idea from a real world law in Argentina that says that the seventh consecutive son or daughter in a family is godfathered by the president. And I thought that was such a fascinating law. And it turns out it's based on a superstition about the seventh children and all of this, you know, and I think, you know, so it very much ties into, and, you know, why did I choose Argentine lore for this story? Because Argentina has been through stuff. And at the time when I was coming out with this, we've been going through some stuff, particularly at our border. And, you know, my parents met at the end of the Guerra Sucia in Argentina, which was a horrible coup. Like it was a military government. They were literally taking children from their families. And many of those have never been reunited. And so I felt like it was important to lace sort of real world messaging into this fantasy thing, because ultimately it does matter in the real world. What you said is so true. We write to engender empathy and to remind people that their reality is not the only reality. And to do that, you know, and pretend that it doesn't affect the real world, even if it's not about real world stuff, would be disingenuous. So I do think that yes, it has a real world application. And I do think that, you know, you can comb real life for fantastical stories. So like, as we start talking into how we craft these, right? The first thing is going to be your idea, whatever shape and whatever part of the construction that it comes from. And it is pretty cool to comb your own histories, your own culture, your own, you know, experiences to find the magic in the daily life.
Yes. For sure. I love everything you just said. And that is sort of a good lead into the process of making our worlds, which I know we have a few questions about.
I was going to say we have more. So yeah, yes. Let's get into it.
So the process, we're going to send just one more poll, and then we're going to talk about the process of world building, and then we'll get more into questions and everything. So this one is just, do you like to plan your world or characters first, or both at the same time? And I was actually really happy to talk with Romina about this when we were planning the webinar, because we were in agreement. And it's so we both kind of like to plot our world first. For me, I do a little bit of character and a little bit of world to begin with, and then I really want to get the world solid as I can, and then finish building the character.
Your outline is FYI, like 0% world.
Everyone disagrees with us, but I'll explain our reasoning. And Romina has a lot of, she has a really good quote for it too. But my reasoning, and I know Romina's is similar, it's because you're a product of your environment, no matter whether you like it or not. And so the places that we're born and grow up in, all of the influences around us, they make us who we are. And yes, I do like having a little bit of character first. Like I don't have like a super clear image of them in my mind when I first start, but I have a little bit of their voice and what they want. And then I want to get the world in place, because every possible interaction that happens in the book between all of the characters and the character moving in their world, that depends on the world. The character can't exist without the world unless they're floating in space.
Exactly. Same. So I also begin with world. And so the quote that and anyone who's like been to any of my events could probably quote this back to me, but like Alan Watts has this great line about how we're not born into the world, we're born from it. And that line really kind of defines my approach to creation, because we only like are these beings, these biological beings, because we happen to evolve from this dust. You know, were we on any other planet, any other universe, any other kind of existence, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. You know, so I think like for me, as a meticulous Virgo who must go from point A to point B, I cannot jump. I can't like jump letters. I need that. I need to start from like, and first there was light, you know, like, and so I literally take it back to like the big bang of my world. And so I begin with that. And once I know what, and again, like I do understand that for most of us, like we don't wake up and say, this is a universe I want to visit. Now let me think of a plot line for there. You know, yes, of course, like plot / character does come hand in hand to a degree. Like you have an idea of something. But I do think when sitting down, it is good to have it clearer, like which is your starting point. For me, it is world. And once I have a sense of the history of that world, like what Francesca was saying, like we're not born in a vacuum. Like what were the politics? What is the topography? You know, what kind of culture are they growing up in? What kind of technology? What food are they eating? What colors do they favor? What are their fashions? What was the character's best memory? What was the worst one? All of this is part of world building because that's going to hopefully be unique to your universe. Once you've got that, that's when I start to birth my characters because I really want to grow them from that soil. I really want to make sure that they're not reflections of me and other people in our world because then it's not going to feel organic. Lastly, for me is plot because I define plot, and I think a lot of us define plot as literally just choices. Like you're just forcing a character to make a choice, A or B, C or D. It's like being at an eye exam, you know? So really like your character, however strong your character is how strong your plot will be. Like your character really needs to know, you have to have a clear defined goal and know what their basic nature is for arriving at that goal. And then just keep putting problems in front of them and seeing what would this person do. And long story short, that's kind of my process. And of course, feel free to be asking us more questions or to clarify anything.
Yes, and I thought of an example in Diamond City where you can see how I had to think of the world in order to do more with the characters. So my world is very violent, and I have an assassin as a as a main character. And so, how do you make readers care about a character who is literally a murderer? And the answer is in the world, because if you make this, the world is sort of like this palette, and the moral compass in their world is different than in ours. And so you have this world that was formed by its history and by all of the conflicts within it, so that it's this place where violence is expected. And so that makes all of the characters' actions more believable. And so then you look at all of the characters who have a different moral compass than we do, where to them, violence and death are normal and just something that they deal with every single day. And so then you look at all of them and you think, okay, this is the level that I'm operating on. And now the characters within it. Okay, so yeah, I can root for her because she's operating a completely different realm than we are. She's not following the same laws and standards of like, I'm a good person or not than we are, as we are. So.
I love that.
Thanks. It was hard.
We're getting do your characters ever reveal something about the world that you didn't originally factor in? That's a great question. I think they always should. You know, your character should always be uncloaking the universe of your book at the same speed as you or fast or ahead of you. So, sorry, were you?
Oh no, you're good. Yeah, I think I like the side characters to sort of help out with that, because when two characters are interacting, they're going to tackle like whatever problem is in front of them in completely different ways, and that will show what their upbringing is like, what their personal background is, and that in turn will reveal more of the world. So while you're writing your characters' interactions, even if they're just having banter or if they're arguing about something, it will show where they're from and what part of the world they came from. So
and honestly, like your question made me think about something. So with Lobizona, you know, it's one of those like hidden species universes, sort of like in Harry, where like, you know, muggles don't know about wizards, and you know, and that's how I have it here. And then through like a dialogue conversation the characters were having, I discovered that there was like a little poem lullaby thing that Perla used to read to Manu to not make her not feel bad about looking so different and whatever. I didn't know this existed until I'm in conversation and I'm like, damn it, Perla, now I gotta write this thing, you know, and I'm just like, all right, So I wrote this. Los lobisones le cantan a la luna llena. Las brujas bailan cuando el cielo truena. Si te cruzas con uno, no dejes que te inquiete. El secreto está en sus ojos y el número 7. And of course, the English version translation does not rhyme, and I put no explanation because it's like, come on.
So it's so hard with bilingual poems.
But yeah, it was pretty wild. So it is, you know, your character should make it harder on you. Every time you think you're like, I've got this, you know, like it should make you be like, no, you don't. Like there's more mystery and you haven't uncovered it all yet. Because when you do uncover it all, like the story's done, you know? Yeah.
I will say, like, every single time that I, like, you know, in your first draft, you think, okay, I got the world down. But then you start editing.
And the Francesca dance. I got the world down.
My world is good. And then every single round of edits up until like line edits, even, okay, probably not copy edits. I don't know. Actually, yeah, copy edits. I was making tiny changes to the world. It will keep developing. And then in the second book, new things are getting uncovered. And you have to make sure that they don't contradict things in the first book or whatever. But new things are always getting revealed. And for the most part, those get revealed by my characters' new interactions with each other. Or if I have to change the plot for some reason in editing, then that will reveal a new part of the world.
I love that. And that is an important thing also. It's like what you're saying is so true. It's like having things be revealed in action and character and all of this stuff also spares you from those blocky exposition, you know, backstory chunks that like editors just are always, you know, signaling. So it's like the more that the story unfolds organically, the less of that exposition you find you need.
For sure. And I think that does help us answer a couple of the questions that were in here about like, how do you know what's necessary? How do you make people feel immersed without overwhelming them? And like you said, your editor is going to have you cut things, but they won't have you cut things that will make the story unintelligible. That's not the point. And I think with world building and how complex you make it, you want to make sure that everything that is there has a reason for being there. And there are a lot of ways to do that. And I think something that's important to try to remember is that every scene that you write should be dynamic in that it accomplishes multiple things. So instead of just having a scene that shows the world, have it show the world and something about your character, or the world while advancing the plot. So making your scenes dynamic will automatically help you shorten your word count. And it'll help you only include things that are necessary and could even help you uncover new things.
That's such a smart idea. Like even just having a little roster on the side, like where you put out your scenes and just, you know, how many things it's accomplishing. And if it's not accomplishing at least 3, you know, like you don't need that scene. I love that. Yeah.
Or you can, you know, if it's only accomplishing one thing, but that one thing is really important, combine it.
Of course. Yes. Yeah. If it's a turning point, let it be.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's really another thing with exposition is, you know, a lot of times we're so excited about our story and we just want the person listening to have all the information so they can really feel how clever we are. But really there's no need, like if you hold back exposition, not only is it less clunky, but you get to tease your reader. Like you're just kind of like messing with them big time. And you can increase tension just by omitting something. Think about that.
Yeah,
you actually don't have to write to create tension. So really like read through, especially those first 5 chapters, right? Because you really want to avoid hitting exposition before the first 3, you know, definitely, but you know, before so like as you're reading, read through those first scenes and really ask yourself, is knowing this like going to impact, does someone really need to know this yet? Or is the moment of impact still down the line? Can I push this one? You know, it's really a game of rearranging.
Yeah. And I think something like just a small tip that might help out is to read those scenes aloud And if it starts feeling like you're dragging, even if it doesn't feel like it's dragging when it's just in your head, it could feel like it's dragging when you read it aloud.
Yes.
And that'll help you sort of see if something is going on a beat too long, because a reader doesn't know your story as well as you do when they're first, opening your book for the first time. And so when you're the writer and it's going through your head, it goes past at like lightning speed and you're just like, okay, yeah, that's good. But the reader is reading it pretty much, unless they're like super speed reader, then they're reading it at the same pace as you would when you're reading aloud. And so that's a good way to catch if things are going on too long.
That's so great. And yeah, and also it's a great way to catch dialogue. If dialogue doesn't feel authentic and it's like, well, this, characters don't usually speak in the same words we use for narration,
Yeah.
So it's good to remember like, oh, this was dialogue.
Yeah. I think, or I have a bit of, I don't know if it's encouragement, if that's the right word, but just to give you guys an idea of how much you can end up playing around with your story before it gets published. I have a Word document of about 200,000 deleted words from various from various drafts of Diamond City. And a lot of that, I mean, not all of it, some of it was just scenes that don't work anymore, but a lot of it ends up being world build. I mean, like exposition, not just world building exposition, but yeah, exposition in general, wordiness. A lot of it is world building that ends up not being necessary. And in the process of cutting, it kind of hurts your heart a little bit, but the farther you get, you realize that you can sort of make more of an impact with less words that say the same thing than, a whole paragraph that can say the same thing in one sentence.
Another thing, yes. And another thing that goes hand in hand too is description, like when we describe settings and stuff. And I'm actually going to skip to one of the things in the assignment just to get us into like concrete, but like the craft stuff, because like one thing we talked about, Francesca and I, is like combining some of that like descriptive stuff of world building and setting with character and character development. And one way to do that I really like to think about is when you have a particular setting, try describing it from each character's point of view, not for the actual book, but for yourself. Like, how would each one describe it? Each one needs to look at the same room slightly differently, because all of us come at it from different contexts, different brains. And that's going to reveal not just what the place looks like for the reader, but also reveal character for us. So like, to give you a very basic example, if two characters walk into the same empty room, one of them might notice the cobwebs, might notice little pieces of left behind things on the floor, and might be like, this room has been abandoned, forgotten, it's so sad. And the other person might walk in and be like, oh my God, white walls, white space, like, please, like, I'm going to paint this, like, I'm going to make it my world, like, this is a blank canvas. And so that's really important. That tells you a lot, not just about their personality, but where they are in their lives, context, like all of it. So think about those things as you're drafting.
Yeah, that is a really good exercise. And I actually just thought of something that can kind of go along with that I remembered I've done for some projects. I did it for Diamond City too. So I know that you have these big detailed ideas of your world and you wish you could share all of it. So something that helps me is to just write a long description, like literally just describing the world in a document. I'll start from the place that's most familiar to my characters, like their house, and then I'll go to their neighborhood and farther out. And that's just for me. And it has all of the details, but what that helps me with while actually drafting and editing is that I know the parts of that are actually important to my character and the plot, because I have it all in my head and it's already like written out and described. And then I can see how my character would view it in their personal lens.
I love that.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things we're talking about, like, yeah, some of it is structural, building up, but like some of this stuff, like whittling stuff down, that's all for next draft. Like your first draft, your job when you're writing is just to get to the finish line, even if it's a disgusting mess when it makes it there. It does not matter. You get to that finish line, you did it. You did it. You celebrate that. Editing is then just kind of going back and, removing, playing, whatever. But like the first draft, don't let any of these things slow you down.
Yeah. It's all about just getting your vision out in whatever form it is. And then editing is making your vision shine brighter or getting it closer to what you actually have in your head in the most effective way.
So I see that Lisette asked, what are some classics that influenced your craft other than Harry Potter? I was gonna ask, like, classics meaning like, you know, class, but when you said Harry, I know you mean the real classics. Like, that's what's up. So okay, what classics? You know, let's mention what influenced us, and then let's give a shout out to a few Las Musas,
Yes.
so that you guys leave this chat with more for your TBR. So, well, obviously Harry, like, goes without saying. Harry Potter for you as well, right? Harry Potter.
Yeah, and you can definitely see that in Lobizona. It's like Harry Potter for teenagers,
no...
and you're like, what? Really?
Did you know there's no Latino character? I didn't. So yes, Harry for sure. What else? I'm a big Percy Jackson fan. I love that series.
I've heard it's really good. I want to read that. But
so
for
funny.
me, I really loved the Shannara books.
So good.
Oh my God, you actually know them? Well, I usually have to explain. So it's by Terry Brooks, and it's this series that spans like 3,000 years. I think I haven't read like the last 3 or 4, but I don't know, it might go up to like 5,000 years. It starts in like the 90s, if you're reading chronologically, because he wrote them out of order. But starting chronologically, it's in the 90s. It goes through the apocalypse, and then all through like this future with like elves and stuff, and like and a lot of magic. And that really, I think that got me really into world building and loving it, because I think the descriptions in that book are really gorgeous. And, you know, he wrote some of them like decades ago. And so now I think they would be seen as a little bit long-winded. I love that. His older ones, but I love it. And I think his character building is really fantastic too.
That's awesome. Oh, and we wanted to give you a few more for your TBR. So I wanted to give a shout out to my fellow Argentine YA author, the 10th Girl, Sarah Faring. It is in this it's like a gothic psychological thriller, and it's set in this academy in Patagonia in Argentina. If you like thrill, like a dark, if you like your fantasy dark, and you like mysteries, you like, you know, suspense type stuff, like, this is awesome. And then also Woven in Moonlight by my girl Isabel Ibanez. It's her birthday today, so how cool of a gift would it be to get this? And so this is like, I love saying this, but she designed this cover. So I mean, it's like one of my favorites. Anyways, it's a fantasy inspired by her Bolivian heritage. It's really beautiful. It's another world, again, like a very, you know, traditional YA fantasy, like in the vein of all the stuff we love. So I definitely recommend it. I'll let you.
Oh yes, I don't have the books near me, but no. So one that I really love is Labyrinth Lost by Zoraida Cordova, and it's a 3-book series, but each book is from the perspective of a different sister in this family. I've read the first 2. I really love the first one. They go to this other world, and there's a lot of magic, but it's also like a little bit urban fantasy, a little bit. It starts in New York. Yeah, that one, I love that book. And then another one is We Set the Dark on Fire by Taylor K. Mejia. And that one, if you want like a sort of like something that gives you a lot of world building and also has a lot of feminist themes, then I think that one is really good. And also Wild Beauty by Anna Marie Michelmore. Oh my God, it's so good. That might be my favorite book I read in like 2017, I think it was.
I want to read her new Deepen Darkness.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I started that one. It's really good too.
Yeah, I have it on my nightstand.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for Wild Beauty, I think I would classify that as contemporary fantasy, but it also feels historical, and I think it does a really good job of showing sort of historical issues in a fantasy sense, and it has a lot of magical elements too. So you get like the best of everything.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And we do have a document with,
should we send it?
I think so. I believe so. And then we can get to questions for everyone. So this document has a few brainstorming exercises for your world, including the one that Romina gave and a couple more. And then it has a relatively long list of OwnVoices fantasy YA reading recommendations. So, yes. Now,
did it go through?
I think so.
So well, and if you're perusing it and you have questions for us, let us know.
Yes, so you can all download that. And let me see any questions we have here, if you want to put in new ones.
So we're coming up on the last 10 minutes, and I don't want us to talk too much. So yeah, if you guys have more questions for us, please do put them up there, because we don't want to miss answering them.
Yeah, I see a good one. If you've got characters and a world, how do you build, weave, plot around those elements? And I think that one's good, because the plot, and I think what Romina was saying, the plot and the characters inform each other. The characters and the plot are sort of developing at the same pace, and they culminate in the same place, really. The characters' growth or their ultimate like inner challenge happens around the same time that the plot's climax comes around. And so that works together naturally. And the world, I think, is just anything that helps deepen both of those aspects, making sure you're not overwhelming the reader with exposition they don't need.
Exactly. I think as long as you're always coming back to character, you're fine, for world and for plot. And that's why maybe, that's why maybe like it is a little bit of hand in hand, as far as like character will go hand in hand with world building and character will go hand in hand with plot, because like really character is story.
Yeah, like we both like to start with world, but that's to get a strong foundation and to make a character that feels real. But then the character is the one who drives the story. The world isn't driving the story.
Right.
The plot can, but
you can have a million people in that same world. Mm-hmm. You can have a million people in that same world, but why is that your main character? Why is that person the one who's going to best tell your story? And it has to be because the plot are intricately tied.
Yeah.
I see. Melanie, do you struggle creating a world when it's inspired in a real culture, even though it is your culture? Yes, of course. Oh my God. Like more, I think, I don't know if more so than if you're writing a different culture. I think it'd be a different kind of concern, but for sure, because we do, like, this is the thing, like when we label something, when, as you know, Lobizona is a treatise on labels, basically, and how useless they are. But like when we label something, it just like, it just becomes like, sorry, how do you overcome right here? Okay, now I'm distracting myself. I'm sorry. But yes, when we label something, like we start to expect it to be a certain way. And that's wrong. We're creating fantasy. We should be able to explore, but then you start to worry because you're like, okay, it is this culture. It is this specific. And that's why I don't think we should label something as like specifically, it's this other culture, or it's just stories, and not every Argentine is going to see Argentine mythology or culture or foods the same way I'm going to. So I now have this fear of, am I speaking for, all the Argentines who like dulce de leche, or who, so it is, I think there is a bit of a pressure.
Yeah. And I think a key word that you should use is that it's inspired by this culture. It's not based on, it's not supposed to be a replica of this culture. It's inspired by it, because that's what the fun of fantasy is, really.
I agree.
As far as difficulties, yeah, for sure, because especially with Latinx cultures, like, how our countries came to be, they're formed by colonization, genocide, slavery. And so you have all of that to take into consideration. And what culture are you writing? Are you just writing like mestizo culture when you're writing a country like inspired like by Colombia, for example? Like what part of the society are you showing? And so that's a really tough thing that I think Latinx writers specifically have to take into account when writing a Latinx fantasy world. And so In my book, the characters' parents come from a Colombia-inspired country. And so I kind of got a little bit of a way to work around it. But I think as long as you're asking those questions and trying to make sure you're sensitive and keeping in mind that it's inspired by that world and that you're not trying to write a one-to-one account of the world. That's a key point. Okay. So
the writer's block.
Yes. So with writer's block for me, I love this question because for me, when I get writer's block, it means that I'm in the wrong place. I'm starting from the wrong point of the chapter, or maybe that chapter is just completely wrong and there's a reason why I'm bored by it. If I'm bored, then the reader is bored. So a couple of things that I'll try will be to start a little bit farther down. I'll think of a part of the scene or chapter that I'm excited to write, and I'll go to that part first. And then that will usually flow really easily. And then I can think, oh, well, maybe I didn't need those couple paragraphs of introduction anyway. So let me see how much I actually need to get into the part that is exciting. And then another thing that helps is something we talked about earlier is making your scenes dynamic. So making sure they hit at least two aspects. So world and character, world and plot, whatever it is. That will help it feel more dynamic and more just moving it along. And then that helps writer's block as well.
I agree. I normally classify my writer's block as either personal or book related. If it's personal and it's me, like that's the hardest, you know, and it's not like if you're saying get the motivation back to you, if it is, it's really hard, you know, and I think for each person that's whatever kind of inspires you and kind of taps into your creative soul, be that like reading, be it taking a walk. I know right now it's kind of hard. You know, whatever kind of you know, take a journal or unlined paper and just give yourself freedom, you know, and no boundaries, no lines, no anything, you know, so whatever it is, if it's in the book, I love what you said. I have a similar theory. If I get blocked in a book, a lot of times it's because somewhere I stepped off the path and the character either did something out of character or I wrenched something in there or like something was no longer organic and was forced. And I have to retrace my steps until I find where I stepped off. And strategy. Like, then I can continue. And something that helps me sometimes when I'm just blocked on like, okay, I just don't know where to set this or don't know like which, you know, what the device is going to be for getting this information across or whatever. I am a fan of lists. I find that listing really like untaps your imagination because like when you're listing, like your first 10 things will be stuff you've seen or that gets done often. But when you start getting to thing number 13, 14, 15, you're really working those muscles because you're coming up with crazy ideas like way out there. And those are the ideas worth publishing.
For sure. That's really good advice. I think so. Next question.
How do you find strength and confidence as a Latinx author when looking for an agent? Both my husband and I are Latinx authors, and we just self-published our first. Congrats! But it's intimidating.
Congratulations!
Congratulations!
Yes. Seriously, it is. It's always intimidating. I think even once you get an agent, and even once you have a book deal, even once your book is on a shelf, it's like it's really hard to get rid of that feeling. I just debuted, so maybe I don't have as much experience as Romina would.
Well, you know, but I had like I think it's hard, you know. Lobizona started as a different book in 2008. It was called Yellow Eyes, and it was based on the same Argentine law, still immigrants. It was a different story, but it was like same like building blocks. And I couldn't get an agent for it, and I was told that, you know, teens here just weren't interested in reading about Argentine immigrants, basically. And so I didn't write about Argentine immigrants ever again. And so it is sad because you do have to find strength in that. You have to remind yourself, my story is worth sharing. And here's the thing, whatever you're writing, if you're a writer, you're going to have to face that and think those things. But when it's doubled with something personal like that, you really think those things, you know, and you're like, you know what, this story really isn't worth sharing, you know? And so I think that you find that strength in this and attending these kind of webinars, supporting each other, like we're doing, really remembering that we're not each other's competition. You know, I do feel like so many times we look and we see that like exec boards or top positions or whatever are usually held by men, and often white men, you know, and often white cisgender heterosexual men and whatever. And a lot of times we wrongly assume that the only spaces we can vie for are the ones occupied by someone with a marginalized identity or who is a woman or whatever. Why not vie for the whole executive board? You know, we need to start breaking down those walls. Like, it shouldn't be about Latinx books. It should be just all these books, and look how many of them are written by Latinx authors and authors from all over. And so I think part of it is supporting each other. It's believing in your story and not giving up on it. Had I given up on Lobizona, I wouldn't be here now, you know? So it has a good ending.
Yeah. And I think a part of that is like what Romina said, is like just loving your story. If you love it, then someone else will love it. Of course, you have to put in the work with editing and making it absolutely the best you can. But the heart of your story, if it's something that you can connect to, then other readers will be able to connect to it.
For sure.
I believe so. Yes.
Yes. I agree. I think we're here on an hour. So do we have any last questions?
We're just, so there are a lot of upcoming webinars.
So I'm just about to send that. Oh, are you sending it? Okay, cool.
Sure. So yeah, that's just a link to a list of all the other upcoming Las Musas webinars, and you can go there and check it out and register for more. And it was really fun to talk to you all.
I know.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Okay. Are we done? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Laura. Thanks, Daniel. Bye, Adriana, Judith, Melanie.
Feria, thank you. Thank you.
Well, honestly, you guys, like, we're all home now. So if you have questions, find us. I'm on Instagram, Romina Garber, and on Twitter, Romina Russell.
Yes, and I am Francesca Flores author on Instagram and F Flores author on Twitter. It was nice to socialize with humans a bit today.
I know. Oh, Daniel, thank you. Que estás leyendo Lobizona y te encanta. Pero lo estás leyendo con acento argentino o lo estás leyendo así nomás?
It is real.
Because the accent is real.
It is there.
Oh, and this is my other series, in case you're bored and want something to read now. It's 4 books. Zodiac. Oh, thank you. Con acento colombiano. Me encanta el acento colombiano.
The best one.
It's so clear. Yo lo leeré con acento mexicano. Bueno, mexicano también es muy lindo.
Aww. Zodiac. I gotta read that next.
Oh, Zodiac, you're not forgotten. December 2014, that book. That's a while. I feel old. I try to imitate an accent. Okay, you just have to just add an unnecessary SH sound to everything. And talk like you're kind of trying to sing, but it's never quite taking off, you know?
Yeah.
Leer Diabetes con acento colombiano.
Yes.
Oh, artwork for Zodiac. Oh, you guys, your Zodiac artwork, that's the best part of my day. Seriously. Oh my God, I cannot wait to share the Lobizona map, by the way. Like, I have no one to talk to about this, because until the hardcover comes out, no one can see the map. And it's so beautiful.
Oh, I have the arc, but it's like, or I guess it's the bound manuscript. It's just like white with black text.
Oh.
And so we have the same editor, Eileen, and
yes.
I was meeting with her the day before your cover reveal, and she showed it. She handed me the arc, and then she showed me the cover, and I was like,
I know. It's unreal. By the way, for everyone who's still here, there is an awesome pre-order giveaway going on. I wish I could show you. I don't have a hardcover. If we had the hardcover, it'd be coming out May 5th. But because the printers and all the stuff that's going on right now, and we're pushing to August, so I can't show it here. But it is. It's beautiful. And I have a pre-order giveaway going on. So if you go to my bio and my Instagram, definitely submit your pre-order info because it's these pretty pins. They're very beautiful. Yeah. With that really gorgeous artwork, you know, you guys, I keep thinking about what happens with the sequel. Like, what's the
my God.
Like, what's...
I wonder if it'll be like different colors and like...
I don't know, but like
a crescent moon. I don't know. So many possibilities.
Almost like the bar was set kind of high. Like, I'm obsessed with this
right?
artist. I'm obsessed. Like, anyway. Oh, yes, I loved the photo. I loved it. All right, we're gonna hop off so that we let this off.
Okay.
Thank you guys.
Thank you
so
all.
much.
Bye.
Bye.